So it's funny, you say Hawaiian-based educator, not when I open my mouth, right? Grew up in New York, fortunate enough to end up in the Hawaiian Islands somehow. My title of my talk is actually Educating Jetsons Children in Flintstone Schools. One of the things we look at today is how do we educate the Jetson generation, or Gen Z, in schools that have teachers, leaders, and administrators that are focusing on a 20th century paradigm. And the schools mostly were built in the 19th century. So unfortunately, the student that we have in the classroom today is dramatically different than the student we've had before. Looking at this student sitting in this classroom, unfortunately, this is what a lot of schools look like in the US, I'm sure in Canada, and I know in other places. I've been in the UK and everywhere else. The thing is, this is what they want the classroom to look like. They want all the digital media tools. They want those tools that they have outside the classroom, inside the classroom. How do we move from a paradigm where we're based upon standardized assessments, student performance and engagement, right, and graduation rates, to where we actually look at a student learning knowledge and gaining proficiency in what they're passionate about? Chris talked about it earlier today, and that was a great project, honestly, with the Vancouver Olympics, because it actually allowed students that were really passionate about what they wanted to explore to actually go into it. The question is, though, this is what the classroom looks like. So how do we do it? I'm going to give you my ideas of how I've done it, starting at this brand new school 3 years ago called Hawaii Technology Academy. What happened was I was a director of science education for the state of Hawaii, and I got frustrated with people telling me our kids can't, we can't, the policymakers won't let us. So I left the school system, and what did I do? I opened up a brand new charter school. What was the first thing I do? I hired teachers that had the same mindset that I had, that education should be different for all of our kids. It should give them opportunities and options that we didn't have in our education. And how do we do that? We engage social media. You know why? Because if you look back 10 years ago, there really were no social networks. You had listservs and things like that that came, but the formal social networking of Facebook and MySpace and YouTube and all the different things that are out there, and Twitter, that it's been active, the Twitter feed's been active today, they weren't really existent 10 years ago. You know, and if you look 10 years before that, what did the web look like? I was kidding around with somebody yesterday who was about 20 years old. I was speaking at the Computer Using Educators of British Columbia. And I said, I remember in 1984 when I graduated high school, I was happy to have dial-up. Now if I talk to my 10-year-old son, he's going to be 11 next week, if it doesn't come on the screen instantly, he's yelling at the computer. And if I don't answer his text message in 10 seconds, he's calling me saying, what's wrong with your phone? So the intergenerational gaps we're looking at now at these students and what's happened over the last 25 years in education or in technology is dramatically changing the world that we live in. If you look at students today that are 25 years old, graduating college in their master's programs, and a student that's 20 years old, and then one that's 15, one that's 10, the 25-year-old had a very different educational experience with the use of technology than a 15-year-old. Now let's take that down a notch. Take that down to the 5-year-old that's entering kindergarten this year. They're adept at using technology better than most people that are 50. They can grab their parents' iPhone, they can grab their parents' Droid, whatever it is, and actually utilize it as if it's second nature to them. One of my staff has a 3-year-old son named Malachi, and he's forever grabbing her Droid and playing with it because of the games and the features and the functions that are in there. He also has his own iPod Touch. And it's hilarious that he takes those two tools, and what does he do? He tries to touch the computer screen, expecting to get the same response. So you know what's going to happen to that 3-year-old? The creativity and imagination that they're going to have to push their educational leaders is going to be phenomenal. Because their expectation for technology now is so much more advanced than the 15-year-old or the 10-year-old was. The question, though, we have then, how do we get our teachers prepared to teach these students? We really don't. What we have to do is wait for the generation that's in college today to hit the next level, to truly get integration of technology. You have some people that will buy in and actually start to use technology in the classroom. Everybody here obviously values technology in one way or another in their education or economic life. But if you go into a university and you look at most of the professors, And I have a lot of friends that are university professors, and I can tell you right now, I don't knock them, but most of them have less hair and it's grayer than mine. And the reason being is because once you looked at the education system like it was 30 or 40 years ago, that was what the goal of education was. It was a linear relationship to get you from kindergarten through 12th grade, and then once you got out of 12th grade, go into university, pursue your master's and your doctorate, and if you got a university job or you had a doctorate or even a master's degree, you were set for life. You had a job. That's not the case any longer. So change over the last 25 years in education, in technology, in economics. You know, when Basil talked this morning, that was amazing to look at the number of houses, you know, that are for sale and empty in the United States compared to the number of houses in Canada. That's just phenomenal. I never saw the statistic before, but it's just mind-blowing. When you drive by neighborhoods that were decimated because of the economy, and obviously things have to be changed. You know, but the question is, what do we do the next 25 years? What's going to be emerging? Anybody that tells you that they know what's going to happen in education or economics in the next 5 or 10 years, they're guessing just like everybody else is. You can predict based upon the data that you have, but you know what? You honestly really don't know. One thing we do know is that when we start building the schools of the future in the next 20 or 25 years, those schools have to be designed with the child and the teacher in mind. They have to be part of that collaborative team that come together to actually do these things. Otherwise, you know what? It's going to be the same architectural nightmare we have right now where the schools really don't work for the students. I mean, some of them do. I was in a school yesterday in Richmond. It was built 14 years ago, and it's amazing. It's a secondary school, and it was literally state-of-the-art at the time, and it's still pretty close to state-of-the-art now. But we were walking around the halls with a bunch of students, and I was asking, what would you like to see? They said they want more collaborative learning spaces. They want the ability to go online anytime, anywhere, and not be filtered. Because they can actually download from YouTube, but they can't upload from YouTube within the school structure. Whereas that's their learning experience for them. They want to be able to create, communicate, and collaborate with each other. And they want to do this on a real-time basis. They don't want to do it 5 years from now. They want to do it now. So when you look at these students come into the job force and the workforce, and I'm an educator by trade, but I'm fortunate enough to actually understand economics a little bit. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's gotten me put on the Workforce Development Council for the state of Hawaii, which now kind of scares me looking at it. Because the K-12 education system honestly does not prepare children for life, nor does the university system. People talk about on a regular basis of preparing children for work and life. They talk about workforce ready. I'm sure of college and career ready, we've all heard this as well. But you know what? You're preparing them for one thing. You're preparing them for life and to be good, global, empathetic citizens. And if they're not, then you know what? We're not doing our jobs. So when we look at things in the future, collaborative workforce teams, collaborative teaching, student collaboration are key to student success. Because outside in their regular world where they live, with their mobile learning device, whatever it is in their hand, that's what they do. And if you could bring that into the classroom in a formal education setting, I guarantee test scores will go up, student engagement will go up, and the teacher then will be a lot happier because you know what? It makes their job a little bit more efficient if you can start utilizing these tools. The next thing you're looking at is Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat. It's been out for a couple of years now. It is true the world did get much smaller with technology. But you know what? I think more so, the organizations became flat. We figured out ways to embed technology into doing things a little bit more efficiently and a little bit better. The only thing is it did not hit education. Certain places, yes. What they just talked about at UBC with the unschooling. That's definitely, but those are teacher-led. It's one person taking their initiative and running with it. It has not hit large scale. And honestly, if it doesn't hit large scale in the next couple of years, you're looking at our students not being prepared for the global economy and their global peers that they have to deal with on a regular basis. So when you look at here in the future and look at India, Asia, and everywhere else around the world, Canada, the States, and the UK, right? It doesn't matter where you're from any longer. If you can do the job and do it well, that's a great thing. You'll be competent and proficient in the 21st century because you'll end up being able to have a job anywhere in the world. you look back to kindergarten and all the things you learned there. Not to run with scissors, obviously, but if you look back at things like learning to play with others, right? Learning to share, learning to talk in groups and give people a chance to communicate and collaborate with each other. Those are all the things that are still important today. That's the soft skills that will get you a job in the future and change the way we educate our children. If you start allowing these things more and more in classrooms, it will definitely change the way our kids have their educational outcomes. So the rise of virtual collaboration, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this slide before, but if you start looking at this in the last 10 years and how dramatically the number of people working online has changed, it's phenomenal. And now this is work in people that are not technophiles or technology proficient as our students are. Can you imagine what this graph is going to look like in 2015 or 2020? There are states now mandating that students take an online class in their undergraduate education and in high school. I talked to someone the other day that's a librarian here in BC, and they were telling me that they had one son that took a high school class online, and one son that didn't. Both of them were similar learners. And to talk about where you educate boys, obviously that resonated with what Mark had said earlier, but one son that did not take the online class, when he got to college, to university, it was a dramatically different experience for him because he had to learn what it was like to take the class, whereas that other child was one step ahead. So looking at virtual collaboration and how we do these things, this is a social media map. If you look at the mind map here and talk about the tools that we utilize on a daily basis, and this is actually based upon about a 15-year-old student, they're looking at website. Most 15 to 16-year-olds will have some form of their own website. They have their own Facebook page, right? A lot of them have blogs, whether it's a blog through their school or their personal blog, right? They have a home page or a landing page that they always go to that's actually like their iGoogle page that they actually have as well. If you look at the YouTube generation, these kids, that's what they're putting up there, MySpace is becoming a smaller and smaller bubble. The kids today, they're all going on Facebook. The fastest growing demographic for Facebook is actually middle-aged women. And it's funny because the fastest growing demographic for video games is also 28 to 35-year-old women. So if you look at the people, because games were never designed for them. The games were all beat 'em up, crash 'em up games for guys like me when I was 40s, So now games are becoming more, I guess, more sensitive and more focused on what women would want as opposed to what men wanted. But students today, that's their world. That's where they live. And if we don't start addressing that in our education system and designing schools that meet their needs, then what are we going to do in the workforce? Talk to a kid that's 25 years old that graduated from school. What does he say? I want to retire. Seriously, that's what you hear. They don't want to work for a career for 30 years. They want to do something they're passionate about. They want to do something that they like or they love. And 90% of the time, it'll embed around some form of technology that they're interested in. And if they're not interested in technology, it'll be around the arts or whatever it is. But if you talk about children that we're educating and how we actually utilize these tools, we have to make sure that they're embedded in the everyday world, utilizing those tools in the classrooms. Unfortunately, they don't allow cell phones in a lot of schools. It's an administrator-led thing. Mobile learning devices, in my opinion, are the future of education for our K-12 education system. If you ask a school, most schools nowadays, if you ask the children to bring in some kind of mobile learning device that's web-enabled, right, the majority of your class will bring something in the next day. So how do we go about then educating Jetsons children in Flintstone schools? We have to redesign what school is. So from now on, when we start looking at schools and how schools are being built or developed, you have to start with teachers and students. The teacher and student have to be there at every aspect of the creation of that school. And if it's not, you know what? It's not going to work for one of them. Because if we build schools where we always did, or we always have done, right, we're going to end up with the same classrooms, rows, and everything else we've had before. The big opportunities I see here is when you start collecting those people to those groups, so the teachers and the students to the external groups, utilizing all the other social media aspects of their world that they actually live in. Email, social networking. The products that they purchase for the school should all be embedded as well. I was amazed yesterday to hear that in Canada, and I didn't know this, that you have to purchase in the school system from a certain group of vendors because of the tariffs and the import-export stuff and things like that. And I looked at the price of a Lego robotics kit, and I'm very much into Lego robotics, and the reason being, it teaches critical thinking. And I'm into all sorts of robotics because of that. But it was about $150 more than we pay in the States because it didn't keep up with the exchange rate. So when we're looking at the big opportunities of connecting people in groups, we have to look at how we actually connect the students in the classrooms to the tools of today, but with the economics that tie directly into building a school. So if you have the things like that, a price list, it's going to be a challenge, especially in places like Canada and the UK. Student interest is going to guide how a school is built. So if you're building a school and it's going to be 200 students, 300 students, you're going to have subgroups of students within that group. Make sure that they have a voice. Using a wiki for collaboration. Using a blog to actually start building the school and get ideas from around the world. Having these students actually have a voice will definitely make them take ownership of their school. The last thing, right? Well, there's 4 points on here that I actually talked about as well. Web 3.0 to Web 4.0. We talked about Web 2.0 of getting information, Web 1.0, I'm sorry, getting information, Web 2.0 of creating content for the web. Web 3.0 is starting to share information on the web. Web 4.0 in the semantic web, in 10 years, the web is going to be so intuitive to what you're looking for. And maybe this is a prediction that may not come true, but I know with the data mining that a lot of search engines do, it's already starting to do it more so. So look at our educational experience, and why wouldn't we use data like that to drive our education in our classrooms? If we know a student's interested about certain things, engage them in the relevant discussions for their education around that as well. Make sure that they're getting the richer, deeper content by putting videos and animations and simulations in the classroom and the content, because that's the world that they live in. The last thing, all right, and I always leave people with a challenge when I try to speak to them. These are my children, Noelle and Jonathan. They're two dramatically different learners. My daughter, I can leave her alone, and honestly, she'd be successful. She's self-directed, motivated, and my son is like the boys that Mark was talking about earlier. I have to engage him. I have to make sure he does his homework. We all have children or nephews or nieces that we care about. We have to make sure that the education system that they have and that they experience is one that will prepare them for the future. Because you know why? We have a moral obligation to stop educating Jetsons children in Flintstone schools, and that's my idea we're thinking about. Thank you. Thanks,